Dust was still falling from the ceiling when Rena Dalvik decided she was not leaving until the relay was fixed. The station shook again. Somewhere above her, boots were running. Soldiers heading to their positions, shouting coordinates, dragging weapon crates across metal floors. Rena stayed where she was, flat on her back inside a narrow maintenance corridor, both hands inside a cracked power relay housing. The job was half done. Half done was useless, so she stayed. Dustfall Station was not a beautiful place. It was a squat, practical colony built on a moon that nobody particularly wanted until somebody found rare mineral deposits beneath its crust. Then everybody wanted it. The humans had been here for years. The Every came 2 years after. Then the Loaf, then the Drainy. They all built sections onto the station and pretended to get along, and mostly they did, because the mineral rights contract kept everyone's economy happy. The Keth Collective had no such contract. They wanted the moon the simple way, by taking it. Rena felt the relay click into alignment. She tightened the coupling, checked the power flow on her wrist display, and watched the green light come on. Done. She pulled herself out of the corridor, sat up on the floor, and wiped her hands on her jacket. That was when she heard the sound behind her. A soft, wet chirp, then the clank of something small dragging metal across the floor. She looked over her shoulder. Sorrow had found the spare toolkit and was pulling it along the corridor floor with her front claws, tail wagging, looking extremely pleased with herself. The baby dragon was about the size of a large dog, covered in pale blue scales that caught the light like still water. Her wings, silver at the tips, still too small to lift her properly, were folded tight against her back. Her eyes were the color of deep ocean, and right now they were fixed on Rena with an expression of complete devotion. Rena put her face in both hands. Soru had arrived 3 weeks ago as a diplomatic gesture from the Dragon clans, a hatching egg, offered as a sign of the clan's alliance with the coalition. It had seemed like a fine gesture until the egg opened in the middle of the engineering bay, and the hatchling inside looked up at the first living thing she saw. Rena, who had been eating a ration bar and was covered in grease, and decided that was her person. No one had been able to explain to Soru that Rena was not her person. Soru had listened to all of these explanations and then gone back to following Rena everywhere. The station alarm went to full emergency. The overhead lights switched to deep orange. A voice came over the intercom. Commander Drail, the Keth Collective defector who led the Allied garrison. Calm and clipped and serious. All non-combat personnel to bunker level. All garrison units to defensive positions. Keth fleet has entered low orbit. This is not a drill. Rena grabbed her toolkit and headed for the upper corridor. Sora fell into step behind her, toolkit dragging on the floor in her claws, still absolutely certain she was helping. Drail was at the garrison command post when Rena arrived. He was tall, gray-skinned, with the flat, hard eyes of someone who had made too many difficult decisions. He looked at Rena. Then he looked at Sora. A long, pained silence followed. "Get that creature to the bunker," he said. "I've tried," Rena said. "Try again." Rena crouched down and looked Soru in the eyes. "You have to go downstairs. It's going to be loud up here. Dangerous." Soru listened carefully to all of this. Then she locked her front claws around Rena's boot and sat down. Drail made a sound that was probably a Keth sigh. "She is your responsibility. She's not technically mine." "She is now? Do not let her near the weapons systems." Rena straightened up. Through the command post's narrow viewport, she could see the first Keth landing craft punching down through the atmosphere. Long dark shapes trailing fire, too many of them, falling toward the station's defensive perimeter like dropped stones. Orvik appeared at her shoulder. He was Rena's squad mate, a solid, quiet man who had the calm of someone who had stopped being surprised by bad situations a long time ago. He looked at the craft falling from the sky. Then he looked at Soru, who was also watching them with enormous curious eyes, head tilted to one side. "She's going to be a problem," Orvik said. "She's going to be fine," Rena said. "I meant for us." Rena clipped her toolkit to her belt and checked her sidearm. The Keth landing craft were close enough now that she could hear them, a deep, rhythmic thunder that she felt more in her chest than her ears. She looked down at Soru. "All right," she said. "Ground rules. Stay behind me. Don't eat anything. Don't breathe on anything electrical. Don't sit on anything that looks important." Sora chirped, wings rustling, eyes bright. Rena did not feel particularly reassured by this response, but she didn't have time to argue. She moved toward the defensive line. Saru trotted behind her, still dragging the toolkit, tail sweeping the floor in wide, cheerful arcs. The first Keth boots hit Duskfall's surface 2 minutes later, and a baby dragon who had never seen a battle in her short life walked straight into one, because her person was going, and that was simply that. The Keth did not waste time on speeches. They landed, they formed up, and they pushed forward, a clean, disciplined advance toward the station's outer gate. Their armor was thick and pale, their weapons precise. Every unit moved in formation, like they had done this before and found it easy. The Allied garrison held the old refinery gate, a wide checkpoint where 2 tall walls of reinforced metal funneled any ground approach into a narrow corridor. In theory, it was a strong position. In practice, the Keth were already finding angles around the left wall, and the garrison's units couldn't coordinate because their comms were full of noise. Rena heard it the moment she plugged her earpiece in. Not silence, worse than silence. Overlap. Every channel was being flooded with ghost signals. The Keth had brought jammers, and the jammers were good. Orders were getting through in fragments. Units were hesitating, waiting for confirmation that never came clearly enough to act on. Drail was at the command post at the rear of the gate, speaking in rapid Keth-trained coalition standard, trying to push instructions through the noise. His face was controlled, but his hands were tight on the edge of the console. He knew what the jamming was doing to his defense. Rena knew it too. She found a wall junction box 40 meters back from the front line, behind a stack of equipment crates. She pulled it open, looked at the wiring inside, and spent about 8 seconds figuring out what she needed. "Orvik," she said, "I need 4 minutes." He moved without asking questions, putting himself between her and the direction of fire, weapon raised. That was the thing about Orvik. He didn't need explanations. He just needed to know how long. Saru, who had been trotting at Rena's heels, looked at the open junction box with intense interest. Rena pointed at the floor beside her feet. "Sit. Don't touch." Saru sat. She stared at the wiring with the focused expression of a creature deciding whether wires were edible. Rena worked faster. The Keth jammers worked by flooding the main comm frequencies, the ones the garrison used because they were standard, easy, and everyone knew them. The jammers were powerful, but they were not subtle. They were covering a wide band rather than targeting specific signals. That meant there were gaps, small ones, in frequencies that nobody normally used because they were inefficient, too much power draw for too little range under normal conditions. But Duskfall's refinery grid still had active power conduits running beneath the entire station surface. Old infrastructure, never fully decommissioned. Those conduits could carry a signal in a completely different way, not through air, but through the station's own bones. Rena rerouted 3 non-essential systems: heating coils in an empty storage wing, a deactivated water recycler, and the exterior lighting on the east wall, which nobody needed right now, and used their combined power draw to push a local mesh relay through the refinery conduit network. It was inelegant. It was lossy. It would not carry video or complex data. It would carry voice, clear voice, across the entire station surface. She finished, slapped the junction box shut, and keyed her earpiece. "Drail, try channel 9. A pause. Then Drail's voice came back, clean and sharp. "How did you? Talk later. You have comms." She heard him shift immediately, snapping orders through the restored channel, redirecting 2 units to cover the left wall angle. The hesitation at the front line broke. The garrison started moving with purpose. Orvik glanced back at her. She shrugged. He turned back to his sector. Then a sound, a flat, dull crunch, came from the far side of the equipment crates. Rena turned. A Keth sensor drone, roughly the size of a serving tray, had drifted low over the wall and settled near the crates, rotating slowly, scanning. It was a recon piece. If it transmitted their position clearly, the Keth would know exactly where the command relay was. Soro had noticed it too. She was staring at the drone with her head tilted. Then she walked over to it, stepped directly onto it with both front feet, and sat down. There was a crunch of casing, then the whine of a motor failing, then silence. The drone was flat. Sora looked up at Rena with the calm expression of a creature that had done a perfectly normal and reasonable thing. From behind a nearby crate, Lisa, The Every medic who had been sheltering there with a wounded Loth soldier peered out. Her pale, Every eyes went from the crushed drone to the dragon to Rena. She does that, Rena said. Lisa looked like she was reconsidering several things at once. The moment didn't last. From the front of the gate came the deep, rolling sound that Rena had been dreading since she first saw the Keth landing craft. A rhythmic, heavy percussion. Mechanical, armored. She moved to the edge of the crates and looked toward the gate. Keth walkers. Heavy combat units. 4 of them, squat and wide, moving in column along the approach corridor. The garrison's standard weapons would scratch the paint on those frames. The gate would not hold against walkers. Drail would have to pull everyone into the inner station, and once the Keth had the surface, the game changed badly. Rena looked at the walkers. Then she looked past them, at the old refinery building on the approach's left side, at the rusted pressure valves on its exterior wall, at the faded warning markings, methane storage, inactive, structural integrity verified 6 years ago. She pulled out her datapad and started running numbers. Orvik appeared beside her, looked at what she was looking at, looked at her face. You have a look, he said. What look? The one that means I should find cover. Rena didn't answer. She was already moving, Soru falling into step behind her, eyes bright, wings half spread, as if she could feel that something interesting was about to happen. She was right. Getting into the refinery sub-level required going through a side door that was technically locked, through a corridor that was technically a safety hazard, and past a ventilation shaft that smelled strongly of old chemical residue and poor decisions. Rena went first. Orvik followed. Sara squeezed through the door with her wings folded flat and immediately started sniffing everything with enormous enthusiasm. Stop that, Rena whispered. Sora stopped sniffing one thing and started sniffing something else. The refinery had been in partial use 2 years ago, then decommissioned when the newer processing facility was built on the station's south side. The methane lines had been sealed off, but sealed off was not the same as empty. The old storage cells still had residual gas, locked behind pressure valves that hadn't been touched in years. Rena's plan was simple in concept. Open the main vent line beneath the Keth Walker approach corridor, flood the channel with gas, and ignite it with a small directed charge. Not enough to destroy the walkers. Their armor was too heavy. But the concussive pressure, contained by the corridor walls and channeled upward beneath the walkers' treads, would be enough to flip them. Flip them, crack their tread mechanisms, and the walkers were just very expensive furniture. She explained this to Drail over the mesh relay while moving through the sub-level. Drail's response was a long pause. Then, your species does this? This is normal human engineering? It's normal human problem solving. Another pause. Authorized. Be fast. The main vent valve was at the deepest point of the sub-level, a wide metal wheel on a vertical pipe connected to the primary gas line. Rena reached it, gripped the wheel, and pulled. It didn't move. She pulled harder. Nothing. She got both hands on it, braced her feet, and put her whole body into it. The valve was corroded solid. 6 years of no use, and the seal had fused. Orvik tried it. Same result. Rena looked at her toolkit. She had a cutting blade, a small plasma torch rated for precision work, and a pry tool for relay panels. She picked up the plasma torch and thought about it for 3 seconds. Then she started dismantling the torch housing and rebuilding it. Longer barrel, manual pressure release, turning it from a precision tool into something that could sustain a focused cut for 30 seconds instead of 5. She was halfway through this when the sounds started from the corridor above, boots on metal, moving quietly, but not quietly enough. Keth, a scout team, sweeping the building. Orvik moved to the sub-level entrance without a word. Rena kept working. Soru crept to the base of the entrance stairs and went very still, watching upward with hunter's eyes. The torch modification took 4 more minutes. By then there were sounds of contact above, Orvik keeping the scout team busy in the narrow corridor, trying to be quiet about it, and failing once when something metal hit the floor loudly. Rena finished the modification, applied the heat lance to the corroded valve, and watched the corrosion burn away in a thin orange line around the seal. She grabbed the wheel and wrenched it. This time it moved, slowly, grinding, then faster. The pipe shuddered. She could feel the pressure shifting below her feet, moving up through the line, feeding into the corridor network beneath the approach. That was when one of the Keth scouts got past Orvik and came down the sub-level stairs. He was big, armored, visor sealed, weapon coming up. He saw Rena at the valve. He started to call out, a signal, an alert. Sora stepped in front of him and breathed. No fire. She was too young for fire. What came out was a dense, warm, wet cloud, pure biological moisture, like the inside of a jungle on a hot day, expelled in a concentrated blast directly at his visor. The visor fogged completely, wall to wall, corner to corner, opaque in under a second. The Keth soldier stopped. He reached up, confused, and clawed at his visor with armored fingers. He couldn't see anything. He turned the wrong way. He walked directly into the support pillar beside the stairs with a sound like a dropped toolbox. Orvik came down the stairs behind him and finished the job efficiently. He looked at Sora. Sora looked back, wings half raised, enormously pleased with herself. Did she just? Orvik said. Yes, Rena said. Was that on purpose? I have no idea. There was no time for more analysis. Rena set the igniter charge at the corridor floor junction, a small thing, timer set for 90 seconds, and grabbed Sora under one arm. They ran. The sub-level door, the hazard corridor, the side door, which Orvik pulled open. Outside air, cool and sharp. They moved fast, low, away from the refinery wall. The timer hit 0. Beneath the approach corridor, the gas ignited. The pressure wave came up through the channel in a single sharp pulse. Not an explosion so much as a shove, precise and enormous. 3 of the 4 Keth walkers went sideways. One tipped completely onto its back, treads spinning in the air. The 4th staggered, cracked a tread housing on the corridor wall, and stopped moving. The formation broke. The Keth ground units behind the walkers lost their center and scattered. The garrison front lines surged forward, filling the gate, pushing the advantage. Drail watched the feeds from the command post. A long silence. Then he spoke to Lisa, who was nearby. How did she know the weight distribution and tread clearance tolerances of Keth heavy walkers? Lisa glanced toward where Rena was visible on the exterior camera, setting Sora down and dusting off her jacket. I don't think she calculated it. I think she guessed. Drail was quiet for another moment. That is deeply disturbing, he said. He did not sound entirely displeased. At the refinery wall, Sora trotted in a small circle, wings out, tail wagging. She had fogged a visor and run through a dangerous corridor and come out the other side entirely unharmed. And as far as she was concerned, she had been enormously useful. She had not been wrong. Nobody formally gave Rena a new job. Drail simply started asking her questions, and at some point the questions became instructions. And the instructions became a situation where Rena was running the technical defense of an entire station, and nobody had asked if she was comfortable with that. She was not comfortable with it. She did it anyway. The Keth changed tactics on day 2. Heavy walkers were gone. The garrison had demonstrated that those were a liability in the approach corridors. Instead, the Keth fleet in orbit started a sustained bombardment. Not enough to break the shield dome outright. Enough to wear it down over time, the way water wears stone, slow, patient, certain of the outcome. The dome's shield generator was in the station's power core. The power core was rated for 72 hours of sustained bombardment load. The relief fleet was 72 hours out. The math, on paper, said they were fine. The math did not account for stress fractures. By hour 30, Rena had found 3 of them, hairline cracks in the power distribution grid, caused by the constant vibration of the bombardment. Each one bled a small amount of power. Together they were bleeding enough that her revised estimate for core failure was 61 hours. That left an 11-hour gap. 11 hours where the dome would be down and the Keth would land unopposed. She fixed 2 of the fractures herself, belly crawling through conduit channels with a plasma welder, working from her back, arms over her head. Orvik held a torch for her and passed tools and pretended not to notice that both of them were in a conduit that was rated for maintenance personnel but would also collapse very efficiently if the bombardment found a bad angle. The 3rd fracture was the problem. It was on the shield dome's outer skin, a specific access node that could only be reached from outside the dome. During the bombardment, the repair drones couldn't navigate the shrapnel field that the bombardment was kicking up from the surface. Their sensors were too slow, too imprecise. A human could make better decisions faster, see gaps in the debris, time movement between impacts. Rena reported this to Drail alongside her recommendation. Drail looked at the exterior camera feed. The surface outside was not pleasant. Periodic impacts, debris, heat flare. I'll order someone from the combat unit, he said. You need someone who can do the repair, Rena said. Not just someone who can survive out there. I'll order someone with technical training. Drail, she said it flat and even. Name someone on this station who can do this repair faster than me. He didn't answer. He knew the answer. He simply did not want it to be the answer. The silence between them was not hostile. It was the silence of two people who both understood a situation and didn't like it equally. Drail gave a slow, formal nod. The Keth gesture that Lisa had told Rena meant something between acknowledgement and deep respect. One nod. He said one word. Return. Rena was already heading for the equipment locker. The EVA suit she pulled on was rated for industrial use. Not military, not designed for active combat conditions. It would protect her from shrapnel and vacuum. It would not protect her from a direct impact. She checked the electromagnetic grip gloves, the tether line, the toolkit attachment points. Standard checks. She did them carefully. Sora was there. She always found where Rena was going before Rena got there, as if she had a sense for it. Rena crouched down and held Soru's small snout in both hands. The dragon's scales were warm, slightly rough at the edges, smooth in the middle. She had noticed this detail 100 times, and it still surprised her each time. Soru's enormous eyes looked back at her. Not this time, Rena said. I need you to stay. Sora made a sound. Low, unhappy, the start of what would have been a prolonged complaint. Guard Lisa, Rena said. This was calculated. Sora had, over the past 2 days, developed a confusing attachment to the every medic. Possibly because Lisa had accidentally dropped a ration packet near Soru and Soru had eaten it and decided they were friends. Giving Soru a job that involved Lisa was the closest thing to a guaranteed stay that existed. Soru looked at Rena. Then she turned, walked to where Lisa was crouched behind a console, and sat directly on the medic's left foot. Lisa looked down at the dragon on her foot, then up at Rena. I am being guarded, she said. That's correct. I don't know how I feel about that. She's warm, Rena offered. Then she sealed her helmet and moved to the airlock. The bombardment outside was rhythmic once she was in it. Not constant, but regular. She could feel the impacts through her boots where her tether connected to the dome's surface. She counted the gaps between them, let 2 pass, moved fast during the third. The access node was where her map said it was. The fracture was worse up close, a 12-centimeter split in the coupling housing, slowly flexing with every impact. Each flex made it slightly wider. It would fail catastrophically in 3 to 4 hours if left alone. She got to work. Inside the station, Soru sat on Lisa's foot and did not move. But her head had turned, and her eyes were fixed on the outer wall, and her ears, flat, scaled, almost invisible, were pressed forward in the position that Elder Naven, the old dragon in the diplomatic quarters, had once described as the listening posture. The position a dragon took when it was tracking something it cared about at a distance. Lisa watched the dragon's expression and found, to her own surprise, that she found it comforting rather than frightening. Outside, Rena worked. Inside, Sora listened. The bombardment continued, patient and even, like it had all the time in the world. It didn't. But it didn't know that yet. Rena had been outside for 19 minutes when the fracture coupling gave her its first real problem. The split in the housing had flexed one too many times, and the interlocking ring had partially rotated. Not enough to break, but enough to bind the repair clamp she was trying to seat. She needed to reset the ring before the clamp could seal. The tool for that was a ratcheting spanner, 7th item in her belt kit. She got it out, got it onto the ring, applied torque. The bombardment hit a nearby impact at that moment. The surface shuddered. The spanner slipped. She caught it. Her grip held. The electromagnetic gloves were earning their price. She reset the tool, applied torque again, slower this time, and felt the ring shift back into alignment. Good. Now the clamp. She had one hand on the coupling and one hand guiding the clamp head into position when the exterior camera feed, which was still running on her helmet display in a small corner window, showed her something she did not want to see. A Keth strike fighter, running a low strafing pass along the dome's surface, had broken off from its escort formation. It was not strafing now. It had slowed. It was targeting. The heat lock indicator on her helmet display flared orange. The fighter had found the access node. It had found her. She had maybe 4 seconds. The EVA suit had no thrust capacity. She couldn't move fast enough to clear the blast radius. Not on a tether, not on a dome surface in the middle of a debris field. She did the only thing she could do, which was seat the clamp as fast as physically possible and start the seal cycle, because she was not leaving this job half done. She was aware that this was possibly an irrational priority. She did it anyway. Inside the station, Sora stood up. She had been still for 19 minutes, the longest she had been still since hatching. Lisa had been watching her. The moment the dragon stood, Lisa sat up straight without knowing why. Sora's scales had gone tight, flushed, the blue deepening to the shade of a storm sky. Her head swung toward the outer wall. Her ears pressed forward hard. Elder Naven, the old dragon who had come quietly from the diplomatic quarters sometime in the last hour and settled in the corner without explanation, watched from beneath heavy eyelids. Sora made a sound, low, short, a single note that wasn't quite a word in any language but carried meaning anyway. Then she moved. She hit the emergency outer hatch release at the base of the wall. A handle Rena had shown her once, months ago, demonstrating that it was something Sora must never touch. Sora had listened carefully at the time and filed that information under a different category than Rena had intended. She slammed it with both front paws. The hatch blew open, and she launched herself outside before anyone in the room could close the distance. Orvik ran after her and stopped at the hatch edge. Outside was the dome surface, the debris field, the bombardment. He couldn't follow without a suit. He grabbed the camera feed and looked. On screen, Rena at the access node. The clamp seal 70% complete, the Keth fighters targeting locks solid and final. And Saru, small, ridiculous, 3 meters of pale blue scales and silver-tipped wings, clearing the hatch at a dead run, wings snapping open. She was not large enough to intercept the missile with her body. She had to have known this. She had been following Rena into tight spaces and dangerous situations for weeks. She understood scale. She was not stupid. She was also not breathing fire. She had tried before, in the corridors during the first ground assault. What came out was warm and wet and useless for combat, and she had learned that. She spread her wings to their full span, 3 meters, silver catching the pale exterior light, and she screamed. It was not like any sound a person makes when they scream. It was a biological frequency, a resonant sonar note, the kind that dragons use in the pitch dark of deep caves to map their environment. Pure, high, sustained. A sound that moved through solid material as easily as through air, that the proximity sensor in a Keth micro missile heard as a massive, close, solid object directly in its path. The warhead detonated 20 meters out. The shockwave hit Soru like a wall. She tumbled. Rena had seen it. She had watched the whole thing in the corner of her helmet display while her hands finished the seal cycle on pure reflex. The clamp locked. The seal hit green, and she pushed off the dome surface on her tether, swung out, and caught Sora mid-tumble with one hand. Electromagnetic grip, full power, closing on the dragon's scruff with a force that could hold a docking clamp. She slammed back into the dome surface. The tether went taut. She hung there, one hand on a dome strut, one hand holding a dazed and slightly scorched baby dragon against her chest. Sora made a sound. Small, uneven, but present. Inside, Orvik watched the feed. He had not moved. He was not certain he was breathing. Behind him, Lisa was very still, one hand pressed over her mouth. Elder Naven spoke from the corner. His voice was slow and deep, the voice of something very old. She bonded the hatchling truly, he said. The dragon chose correctly. Lisa didn't answer. She was watching the feed, the human hanging off the dome in an industrial EVA suit, holding a small dragon in the middle of a bombardment zone, and not letting go. When Rena came back through the airlock 4 minutes later, she sat down on the floor. She didn't move toward a chair or a console or a debrief. She sat on the floor, suit still sealed, and held Soru in both arms while the dragon shook slightly from the concussive blast. Unhurt, physically, mostly, and made a low continuous sound like a kettle just below boiling. Rena had been told, once, that sound was how dragons anchored themselves after fear. That it meant, I am here. I am still here. She held on, and didn't say anything. She didn't need to. The relief fleet arrived at hour 59. 11 hours early. The Keth, General Wuru, watching his tactical display shift from favorable to irreversible in the span of 12 minutes, made the only rational decision left to him. He called the withdrawal. The landing units broke contact and pulled back. The strike fighters returned to formation around the fleet. The fleet folded out of local space in a clean, efficient line, the way the Keth did everything precisely, without wasted motion, even in retreat. The bombardment stopped mid-rhythm, as if someone had turned off a sound that had been running so long everyone had stopped hearing it. The silence was loud. Rena was in the engineering bay when it ended. She had been rerouting power from the backup cells to begin recharging the dome generator. The seal on the outer node was holding, the fracture was closed, and the dome was at 62% capacity, which was not great, but was functional. She heard the silence replace the bombardment and stood still for a moment, listening to it. Then she picked up her spanner and kept working. Orvik found her there 10 minutes later. He leaned against the doorframe and watched her for a moment. "It's over," he said. "The generator recharge needs to be supervised for the first cycle or the feedback regulator overloads." "Rena, it's over." She set the spanner down. She sat on the equipment crate beside her workbench. Soru was asleep under the crate. She had been asleep for 4 hours, recovering, small body rising and falling in a slow, deep rhythm. Her silver-tipped wings were spread out flat on the floor the way they went when she was truly relaxed, not just resting. "How bad were our losses?" Rena asked. Orvik told her. She listened without looking away from the generator display. The numbers were not good. They were not as bad as they could have been. That was the kind of math that battle left you with. Not good news, just less bad than the worst version. She sat with it for a moment, the way you had to. Then Drail's voice came over the mesh relay. "Dalvik, command post. Now." She went. The command post was full of people, garrison officers, Every and Loth representatives, Lisa at the back with a datapad, Elder Naven near the door taking up more space than most pieces of furniture. Drail stood at the center console. When Rena walked in, Drail turned to face her. "The Keth Collective High Command has received the full action record of this engagement," he said. "Standard documentation, including all technical interventions and their outcomes." He paused. "The Coalition High Council has also received it. They have additionally received my formal commendation report." Rena looked at him. "You filed a commendation?" The Amber Seal of Valor is the highest military recognition the Keth Collective awards to non-Keth individuals. He reached to the console beside him and picked up a small object, a hexagonal disc, deep amber, with a sigil pressed into its face. He held it out. "You are the first human to receive it." Rena took it. She turned it over in her hands. It was heavier than it looked. The room was quiet. It was the kind of quiet that wanted to become applause or ceremony, and Rena could feel that pressure building. And she could also feel that Drail understood she didn't want that, because he had filed the commendation in writing and presented the seal with about 4 words of preamble, which was the most restrained possible version of the thing. She appreciated it. She gave him a nod. He gave her one back. That was the whole ceremony. Orvik, from somewhere near the back of the room. "Did you just get a medal?" "Apparently." "Do you feel heroic?" "I feel like I need 17 hours of sleep and something hot to eat. I can arrange one of those." "Which one?" "The easier one." Lisa came forward after the room began to empty. She handed Rena a ration pack, heated, which required some doing, and stood next to her while Rena aided in the doorway. "I want to ask for a posting to your next assignment," Lisa said. "When the rotation comes." Rena looked at her. The Every medic was young, and she had done her job well in the last 3 days under conditions that would have broken someone less determined. She had also been sat on by a dragon repeatedly and had, somewhere in the second day, stopped flinching when it happened. "Talk to Orvik," Rena said. "He handles the administrative requests." "You have someone who handles administrative requests?" "He hates it. That's how I know he does it right." Lisa smiled. A thin, Every smile, which looked different from a human one but meant the same thing, and went to find Orvik. Elder Naven stopped Rena in the corridor outside the command post. He was old enough that moving was an event rather than an action, and he did it with the gravity of something geological. "The hatchling will remember this day all her life," he said. "It is the day the bond was tested." "She's the one who passed the test," Rena said. Yes. The old dragon regarded her for a moment. That is the point. He moved on. Rena went back to the engineering bay. Soru was awake. She was sitting upright under the workbench with the expression of a creature that had been asleep and was now pretending it had been awake the whole time. Her wings were folded. Her tail moved in a slow arc. When Rena sat down on the floor beside her, she pressed her head against Rena's side and made the low, steady sound. I am here. Still here. Rena put her arm around the small, warm body. Later, in the Coalition's official record of the Duskfall Station engagement, there was a footnote in the action log. It read, Orbital Missile Intercept, Hour 55. Allied Asset Designation, Soru, Dragon, Juvenile. Method, Resonant Biological Sonar Detonation. Outcome, Successful. Engineer Dalvik recovered safely. Below it, in handwriting that was later confirmed to be Orvik's, someone had added a single line. She thought she was helping. She was. Nobody removed it. It stayed in the record. It stayed there a long time.